People think that betrayal hurts most when it comes from strangers. But let me tell you, the deepest wounds are carved by those who share your blood. I'm 72 now. My hands don't hold the strength they once did, but they still remember every nail, every piece of what I used to build my business from the ground up. For 35 years, I ran a small furniture shop in Ohio, creating tables and chairs that ended up in family homes across the state. That shop wasn't just wood and tools. It was my pride, my legacy. After retiring, I sold the business and put my savings into safe investments. I never lived lavishly, never drove fancy cars. But I always had enough. Enough to keep my house warm, to pay for groceries, and to help when family asked. My children, Mark and Linda, grew up watching me work until midnight. I thought that taught them the value of sacrifice. I thought wrong. Mark became a banker, Linda a realtor. Both successful on the surface. But their eyes, whenever they looked at me, carried something else. Calculation. As if I were a vault waiting to be opened. And my 3 grandchildren? At first, I thought they adored me. When they were little, they climbed onto my lap, begging for stories. But as they grew older, the warmth faded. Birthday calls stopped. Visits became rare, except when money was involved. Last Thanksgiving, the house felt colder than ever, though the fire was burning strong. Everyone smiled, but beneath those smiles, I sensed impatience. Like they were waiting for something. Waiting for me to die? That night, as I cleared the plates alone, I overheard laughter in the living room. My own blood, whispering plans I was never supposed to hear. And in that moment, I realized my family wasn't just drifting away. They were already gone. The morning after Thanksgiving, I woke up to a silence that didn't feel like peace. It felt like absence. The kind of silence that follows after people have eaten their fill, smiled through their teeth, and left without looking back. I shuffled into the kitchen, the old wooden floor creaking under my steps. On the counter were 3 half-empty wine glasses and a forgotten plate of turkey. Nobody had bothered to wash them. Nobody had said, "Grandpa, let me help with the dishes." They just disappeared. I poured myself coffee and sat by the window. The oak tree outside had lost most of its leaves, branches stretched like tired fingers against a gray sky. I sipped slowly, replaying the words I'd overheard the night before. "If we get the house, I'll sell it in a heartbeat," my son Mark had said. "Dad doesn't need all that space anyway." "Assisted living would be better," Linda had replied, her voice casual, as if sending me away was as simple as taking out the trash. Then came my grandson, Tyler, chuckling. "Grandpa's probably worth more dead than alive." I gripped the coffee mug until my knuckles turned white. They didn't know I was in the hallway, standing still, my heart pounding so hard I thought they'd hear it. They didn't care that every word was slicing me open like a blade. For years, I told myself their distance was just life getting in the way. Busy jobs, growing kids, different cities. But that night tore away every excuse I had ever made for them. They weren't busy. They weren't distracted. They were greedy. Later that day, Linda stopped by to check on me. She entered without knocking, her perfume filling the room like smoke. "Dad, you really should think about downsizing," she said, setting her phone on the table without even looking at me. "This house is too much for you. It's dangerous with all those stairs. Don't you think assisted living would be easier?" "Easier for who?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She blinked, caught off guard. "For you, of course." But I saw it in her eyes. Not concern. Calculation. She wanted the house. That evening, my grandson Tyler called. Not to ask how I was doing, not to invite me over. "Hey, Grandpa," he started, his tone casual, almost rehearsed. "Listen, I was wondering, could you help me out with a down payment? Houses are crazy expensive right now, and, well, you've always been there for us." I swallowed hard. "How much are we talking about?" "Oh, not much. Just 50,000. You'd still have plenty left." Plenty left. As if my life's work was nothing but a bank account for him to withdraw from. As if 50,000 was pocket change. When I hesitated, Tyler's voice shifted. "Cold. I mean, you're not going to use it forever, right? Better it goes to family now than later." That word again, family. Used not as love, but as leverage. I hung up the phone after promising to think about it. But I already knew my answer. No. Days turned into weeks, and the pattern grew clearer. Mark dropped hints about responsibility and how he could manage my finances if I signed some papers. My other grandchildren only showed up when they needed money for tuition, car repairs, or emergencies that sounded suspiciously like vacations. I began to notice the small ways they erased me from their lives. They didn't invite me to birthdays anymore. Christmas cards came late and signed, generic. When I tried to join conversations at family gatherings, their eyes slid away, their voices lowered, as if I didn't belong. One Sunday, I invited everyone over for dinner. I cooked the roast myself, set the table with the old china their mother used to love. But halfway through the meal, my grandson was scrolling on his phone, my granddaughter complained about the Wi-Fi, and Mark was texting under the table. Finally, I put down my fork and asked, "Do you even see me anymore?" The room went silent. For a brief second, I thought maybe they'd look up, maybe they'd feel the weight of what I was asking. But Linda only sighed. "Dad, you're overthinking. We're here, aren't we?" Yes, they were there. Physically. But in every way that mattered, they were gone. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone in the dim kitchen, the roast growing cold on my plate. My chest felt heavy, but not from age, from realization. Blood ties didn't mean loyalty. Love wasn't guaranteed by family. And respect? Respect had to be earned, but it could also be lost. As I washed the dishes, the decision began to take shape in my mind. Quiet. Steady. Like carving would grain into form. They thought they knew me. They thought age had made me weak, predictable, easy to control. But they had forgotten. I built my life from nothing with these hands. And if I could build, I could also destroy. And that night, I decided. If they wanted my legacy, I would give it to someone who deserved it. Not them. The first snow of December came quietly, covering my street in a soft white blanket. I used to love mornings like this. I'd wake up early, shovel the driveway, then sit on the porch with a steaming cup of coffee, watching kids build snowmen. But that morning felt different. The snow didn't soften the world. It sharpened it, making every crack in my life more visible. The phone rang. It was Mark. "Dad, we need to talk," he said. His voice carried that rehearsed seriousness he always used when he wanted something. "Linda and I have been discussing your future. We think it's time you let us step in. For your own good." I stayed silent. He took my silence as permission to continue. "You've worked hard, but you can't manage finances forever. Mistakes happen at your age. I could, take care of things. All we'd need is your signature." The audacity of it hit me harder than the cold air seeping through the window. He didn't even pretend it was about love or care. It was about control. "I'm not senile, Mark," I said, my tone steady. "I know how to pay my bills." He chuckled, low and dismissive. "Dad, don't make this difficult. Families should trust each other." That word again. Family. Twisted into a tool to bind me, not free me. When I hung up, my hands were trembling, not from weakness but from fury. Later that week, I decided to stop by Linda's office unannounced. I hadn't seen her in days, and something gnawed at me, telling me to go. When I walked in, she wasn't surprised to see me. In fact, she looked annoyed. "Dad, you should have called," she muttered, pushing aside a stack of real estate papers. I sat down across from her. I wanted to talk face to face. But then, my eyes caught something on her desk. Papers. Contracts. And on the top page, my own address was listed. My home. My sanctuary. I picked it up. "What's this?" Linda's face paled. "Oh, that's just a draft listing." "A draft?" I snapped. My voice echoed in the office, startling her secretary outside. "You're planning to sell my house? Before I'm even gone?" She froze. For a moment, her mask slipped. "Dad, listen, it's just business. We thought you'd be happier somewhere smaller. Safer." "Safer for me," I said bitterly. "Or easier for you." Her silence told me everything I needed to know. That night, I couldn't sleep. I wandered through the house, touching the banister I'd carved myself, the old clock that still ticked in the hallway, the photographs on the wall. Every piece of this house was a memory, a life lived, and they wanted to strip it away like it was nothing but drywall and profit. As I stood in the living room, I heard a faint vibration. My grandson had left his tablet behind last visit. It lit up with messages. I shouldn't have looked, but something inside me told me I needed to. The chat was between my 3 grandchildren. "Tyler, once Grandpa's gone, we're set. That house is prime real estate." "Emily, Linda says it's worth at least $500,000. We can split it." "Josh, can't believe he's still holding on. Guess we just wait." Wait. Like vultures circling the sky, watching me breathe, annoyed that I hadn't stopped yet. My knees almost buckled. It wasn't just Mark. It wasn't just Linda. It was all of them. Every single one I had once cradled, fed, carried on my shoulders, kissed goodnight. My blood. My family. They weren't planning for my future. They were planning for my death. I sat in my chair until the first light of dawn broke through the curtains. My heart felt hollow, but my mind was sharper than it had been in years. That was the night something inside me shifted. No more excuses. No more denial. I pulled out my old address book, flipping through names until I found one I hadn't dialed in over 20 years. Richard Collins, my friend from the Army who had become a lawyer. The last time we spoke, he told me, "If you ever need to protect what's yours, call me. Doesn't matter how much time has passed." I picked up the phone with trembling hands and dialed. The line clicked, and a deep voice answered, older but still familiar. "This is Collins." "Richard," I said, my voice cracking but steadying with each word. "It's me, Thomas. I need your help. It's about my family." There was a pause. Then his voice softened. "Tell me everything." So I did. Every betrayal. Every word I had overheard. Every piece of evidence I had gathered without meaning to. When I finished, there was silence on the other end. Then he said, "Thomas, I've seen greed tear families apart before. But you still have power. More than you think." And at that moment, I knew. My children thought age made me powerless. My grandchildren thought time made me irrelevant. But they were wrong. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't irrelevant. I was just getting started. Richard invited me to his office the following week. The building was old, tucked away on a quiet street downtown, with heavy oak doors and shelves lined with law books that smelled of dust and age. As I stepped inside, I felt a strange comfort. The world outside was rushing, greedy, impatient. But here, in the silence of Richard's office, it felt like time had slowed down. He greeted me with a firm handshake, his gray hair neatly combed, his suit pressed sharp. "You haven't changed much, Thomas," he said with a small smile. "Still carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders." "Except this time," I replied, "the weight isn't mine. It's theirs." I laid everything out. The conversations I overheard, the listing contract on Linda's desk, the text messages from my grandchildren. Richard listened without interrupting, only nodding occasionally, his pen scratching notes on yellow paper. When I finished, he leaned back, fingers steepled under his chin. "They've already shown their intentions. Which means you still have the upper hand. If they think they know your estate, your finances, your future, let them. But you're the one holding the cards." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He slid a folder toward me. "You can rewrite your will. Reassign everything. Make sure the ones who betrayed you never see a dime. But more than that, you can control how they find out. It doesn't have to be quiet. It can be a lesson." The word lesson lingered in the air like smoke. I nodded slowly. "I don't want revenge, Richard. Not in the way people think of revenge. I don't want to ruin them. I want them to feel what I felt. To know the pain of being betrayed by family." Richard's eyes softened. "Then let's give them exactly what they deserve." That night, back in my house, I felt a new kind of strength coursing through me. For weeks, I had been drowning in sorrow, but now my grief was hardening into something else, resolve. Still, the attacks from my family didn't stop. In fact, they grew bolder. Mark came by one evening, uninvited, carrying a folder under his arm. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same table where I had taught him multiplication as a boy. He spread the papers in front of me, legal documents, neat and official looking. "Dad," he said, his voice firm but not unkind, "this is for your own protection. It's a power of attorney. If you sign, I can handle your bills, your accounts, everything. You won't have to worry about a thing." I scanned the papers, my stomach tightening. Every line screamed control. If I signed, my life wouldn't be mine anymore. It would be his. "Mark," I said carefully, "do you remember when you were 12 and you begged me for a bike? I told you I didn't have the money, but I saved for months until I bought it for your birthday. Do you remember the look on your face when you unwrapped it?" He hesitated, his jaw tightening. "Dad, what does that have to do with anything?" "It has everything to do with this. Back then, I gave you what you wanted because I loved you. And now, you're asking me to sign away my freedom. Not because you care about me, because you care about what's left when I'm gone." His face darkened. "You're being paranoid." "No," I said quietly. "I'm being clear." He shoved the papers back into the folder and stood up, his chair scraping the floor. Fine, but don't say I didn't try to help. When he left, the silence of the house pressed down heavier than ever. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the doorway he had slammed behind him. A few days later, Linda came by, this time with Tyler in tow. They brought takeout, smiling too brightly, their words sticky sweet. "Dad," Linda began, "we were thinking, maybe Christmas at my house this year. It's easier, no stairs, no stress." Tyler chimed in, "Yeah, Grandpa, you could stay with us for a while. You know, until you figure things out." I saw through their smiles. Their words weren't an invitation. They were a test. They wanted to see if I'd bend, if I'd let go of my independence. I forced a smile. "That's kind of you," I said, "but I like it here. This house has everything I need." Tyler's smile faltered. "Yeah, but it won't last forever, you know?" My jaw tightened. Nothing does. That night, after they left, I called Richard again. "It's worse than I thought," I told him. "They're circling like vultures. I can't wait any longer." He replied calmly, "Then we won't. The papers are ready. All that's left is your signature." As I hung up the phone, I looked around my home once more. The old photographs, the creaking stairs, the kitchen table scarred with decades of meals and arguments and laughter. They thought they could take this from me. They thought they could erase me. But they were wrong. Christmas was coming. And with it, the perfect opportunity. A family gathering. A stage. A final act. They wanted my legacy. I would give it to them, but not in the way they expected. Christmas Eve arrived like it always did. Snow blanketing the streets, houses glowing with warm lights, the air filled with carols and the smell of cinnamon. But inside my chest there was no warmth, no music. Only a heavy calm, the kind that comes before a storm. I had decorated the house myself. The tree stood tall in the living room, draped with ornaments that dated back to when my late wife and I were newlyweds. The fireplace crackled, stockings hung neatly in a row, though I knew none of them cared anymore. Still, I set the stage. Tonight wasn't just Christmas. Tonight was the night I would reclaim myself. By 7 o'clock, they all arrived. Mark first, with his wife and 2 children, his suit crisp as if he were attending a business meeting rather than family dinner. Linda followed, wrapped in her expensive fur coat, Tyler at her side, his headphones dangling around his neck as he scrolled through his phone. Emily and Josh came too, their laughter hollow, their eyes darting around the house like appraisers. "Dad, everything looks wonderful," Linda said, kissing my cheek quickly before adjusting her earrings. "Really festive." "Yeah, Grandpa," Tyler added without looking up. "Nice job." Their words were shallow, their smiles rehearsed. But I returned the smile anyway. Let them think I was the fool. Dinner began as always. Carved turkey, mashed potatoes, my wife's old cranberry recipe that no one appreciated but me. They ate. They chatted, but I noticed how their glances kept straying to the sideboard, where a thick folder lay. My folder. They thought it was the will. They thought tonight I would reveal their inheritance. When dessert was finished, I rose slowly from my chair. The room fell quiet, forks clinking against plates before silence swallowed the air. All eyes turned to me. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight." I began, my voice steady, carrying more weight than it had in years. "This may be the last Christmas we share in this house." Linda leaned forward eagerly. Mark sat straighter. Tyler finally pulled out his earbuds. "You see," I continued, "I've been thinking a lot about the future, about what happens when I'm gone. And I know you've all wondered the same." Mark cleared his throat. "Dad, you don't need to stress about that. We're here to make sure everything is handled properly." "Yes," Linda added quickly, her smile almost trembling. "We just want what's best for you." "What's best for me?" I said, fixing my gaze on her. "Or what's best for you?" A ripple of discomfort spread around the table. Emily shifted in her chair. Josh looked down. I reached for the folder on the sideboard, holding it up so they could see. Their eyes lit up like greedy children on Christmas morning. "This," I said, "is my will." The silence was deafening. They leaned forward, breaths held, waiting for the verdict. I opened the folder slowly, deliberately, letting the tension thicken like fog. "I have decided," I said, "that none of you will inherit this house, or my savings, or anything I've worked for all my life." Gasps filled the room. Linda's hand flew to her mouth. Mark's face turned red, his jaw clenching. Tyler muttered, "What?" under his breath. "You heard me," I continued. This home, my accounts, everything, has been signed over to the local Children's Foundation and the public library. They will carry my name, not as a vault of money, but as a legacy of giving. The room erupted. You can't be serious. Mark barked, slamming his fist on the table. After everything I've done. Everything you've done? I interrupted sharply, like trying to trick me into signing away my life, or planning to sell this house while I was still breathing. Linda's face twisted. Dad, that's not fair. We were only trying to. To what? To erase me? To wait me out like vultures circling the dying? My voice cracked, but I didn't waver. Do you think I didn't hear you? Do you think I didn't see the greed in your eyes every time you stepped into this house? The grandchildren sat frozen, their phones forgotten. I raised you. I said, softer now, my eyes on Mark and Linda. I carried you when you were small. I worked until my hands bled to give you more than I ever had. And this is how you repay me. With betrayal. With whispers about my death while I sat in the next room. No one spoke. The crackling of the fire filled the silence, cruel in its warmth. Finally, Tyler stood up, his voice trembling with anger. So what? You're just going to give everything to strangers? To kids you don't even know? I looked at him steadily. Better strangers who will treasure it than family who sees me as a burden. Linda's eyes brimmed with tears, whether of shame or anger, I couldn't tell. Mark shook his head violently, muttering curses under his breath. I closed the folder and placed it back on the sideboard. This is final. My lawyer has it all secured. Nothing you say tonight will change it. The room remained tense, thick with disbelief, rage, and something else, fear. For the first time, they realized they had lost. I sat back down, my heart pounding, but my mind clear. For the first time in years, I wasn't the weak old man they dismissed. I was their father, their grandfather, and I had just reminded them who held the true power. The night ended with slammed doors, bitter words, and silence that echoed louder than any argument. But when the house finally grew quiet again, I sat alone by the fire, staring into the flames. My chest felt heavy, yes, but not with regret. With release. They thought they had won. They thought I would fold. But Christmas had given them more than dinner. It had given them a lesson, and I wasn't sure they'd ever recover from it. The days after Christmas felt like standing in the eye of a storm. Outside, everything looked calm. Snow still lay over the lawn. The world moved on with its cheer. Neighbors waved politely. But inside, I knew the winds were circling. They didn't wait long. Mark showed up first, pounding on my door so hard I thought the wood might splinter. When I opened it, his face was flushed, his tie crooked as if he'd come straight from a sleepless night. You can't do this, he snapped, storming past me into the living room. You can't just throw away our family's future. Our family's future? I repeated, closing the door behind him. Or your inheritance? He turned, eyes burning. You don't understand, Dad. That house, your money, it's supposed to stay in the bloodline, not be handed out to some strangers. I steadied myself, gripping the back of my chair. Bloodline means nothing when the blood has run cold. For a moment, his mouth opened, but no words came. He shook his head violently, pulling papers from his briefcase. Then we'll fight this. You may think you're clever, but wills can be contested. We'll see what a judge thinks of your little stunt. I almost smiled. I expected as much. That's why Richard has already filed everything airtight. Every signature notarized. Every clause ironclad. Contest it if you want, but you'll lose. The folder in his hands slipped slightly. For the first time, I saw not anger in his eyes, but fear. 2 days later, Linda came. Unlike Mark, she didn't shout. She came dressed in elegance, her perfume clouding the air, her tone dripping with fake sweetness. Dad, she said, sitting across from me, crossing her legs carefully. We don't have to make this ugly. You're emotional. Hurt. I understand. But think of the children. Think of your grandchildren. Do you really want to leave them with nothing? Nothing, I repeated softly. I gave them everything that mattered already. Time. Love. Stories. I gave them my youth. And they squandered it. What's left is not theirs to take. Her smile faltered. For a long moment, she just stared at me, her painted nails drumming against the armrest. Then she stood abruptly. Fine. Do what you want. But don't expect us to come running when you're alone. When the door slammed behind her, I whispered into the quiet. I've been alone for years already. The grandchildren didn't come themselves. Instead, I received cold, clipped text messages. Tyler wrote, "So you're really screwing us over?" Unbelievable. Emily said nothing, only posted online about toxic family elders. Josh left a voicemail, his voice bitter. "Guess you never loved us after all." I didn't respond. Words meant nothing to them, not anymore. But Richard called me every other day, checking in. "They'll push," he said. "They'll try to scare you, guilt you, maybe even threaten you. But remember, you've already won. The moment you chose dignity over greed, you won." Still, the nights were the hardest. I'd sit by the fire, listening to the creak of the house, the same house they wanted to strip from me. Sometimes I questioned myself. Was I too harsh? Was this revenge or justice? But then I'd recall Tyler's voice. Grandpa's worth more dead than alive. And my doubt dissolved like smoke. Weeks passed. Mark filed a motion in court, trying to argue I wasn't of sound mind when I changed the will. I sat in the courtroom, back straight, head high. When the judge asked me if I understood the consequences of my decision, I looked him in the eye and said clearly, "I have never been more certain of anything in my life." Richard's arguments dismantled Mark's claim piece by piece. Linda avoided my gaze the entire time, her lips pressed thin. My grandchildren sat behind them, arms crossed, eyes full of venom. They weren't grieving a living grandfather. They were mourning money that was never theirs. When the judge ruled in my favor, affirming the will as valid, I felt no triumph, no cheer, only relief. Outside the courthouse, Mark muttered as he brushed past me, "You'll regret this, old man." But I didn't. Not for a second. That night, alone again by my fire, I finally allowed myself to exhale. I had done it. I had cut the chains they had wrapped around me. And though it cost me the illusion of family, it gave me something greater, peace. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, the kind I saved for special occasions, and raised it toward the empty room. To my real legacy, I whispered, not the house, not the money, but the choice, the strength to say no, the courage to walk away. For the first time in years, I didn't feel weak. I didn't feel old. I felt free. But deep down, I also knew this wasn't the end. My family wasn't finished with me. Their greed wasn't done tearing at the edges. And though I had won the battle, the war of silence, guilt, and isolation was still ahead. After the court ruling, the silence from my family wasn't peace. It was punishment. Days turned into weeks, and not a single call came. No visits. No holiday cards. The same people who once circled me like vultures had vanished, leaving behind only shadows of resentment. At first, I thought the quiet might feel like freedom. But silence, when it comes from those you once loved, has a weight heavier than any argument. I felt it in the grocery store when old friends avoided my eyes. One even muttered, "I heard your kids are heartbroken. How could you cut them off like that?" Their voices carried the lies Mark and Linda had already spread, painting me as bitter, selfish, senile. One afternoon, I stopped by the local diner, the place I had eaten breakfast at for years. But the waitress who always greeted me with a smile avoided my table. When I asked for coffee, her words were clipped, her eyes wary. "People are saying some awful things, Thomas," she murmured. It wasn't hard to guess who started those whispers. My own blood, dragging my name through the mud to win back sympathy they had lost in the courtroom. They couldn't steal my house, so they tried to steal my dignity. The loneliness settled deeper. Meals grew quieter. Nights longer. I'd sit by the fire, staring at old photographs. The children on bicycles I'd saved months to buy. The family trips where I drove for hours just to see them smile. Memories that once brought joy now cut like glass. But just when I thought the world had turned its back on me entirely, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from the Children's Foundation, the very one I had left my estate to. The envelope was thick, the handwriting careful. Inside was a card signed by dozens of little hands. "Thank you, Mr. Harlan," it read. "Because of you, kids like us will have books, clothes, and hope. You may not know us, but you saved us." My chest tightened as I read the crooked letters, the hearts drawn in the margins, the innocence untouched by greed. For the first time in months, tears ran freely down my face, not of pain, but of something gentler. Purpose. A week later, the local librarian called. She wanted to thank me in person, to show me the reading room that would soon bear my wife's name. "You've done something extraordinary, Thomas," she said warmly. "People will remember you not for money, but for kindness." Her words lit a small flame in me, one that had nearly gone out. My family had abandoned me, yes. But strangers, true strangers, saw me not as a bank account, but as a human being. And yet, my family didn't stop their war. Tyler posted online, blasting me for choosing strangers over family. His friends, kids who had never even stepped into my house, left cruel comments calling me a monster, a miser, a man who didn't care about his blood. Linda fed those flames, sharing photographs of herself crying, telling everyone she had a father who betrayed her. Mark, meanwhile, doubled down at work, telling colleagues his father was losing his mind. It spread further than I expected. Even the pastor at church gave me a look heavy with judgment when I showed up one Sunday. I didn't stay long. The weight of their hatred pressed hard. Nights grew restless, the silence broken only by the creaks of the old house and the wind outside. Sometimes, doubt crept in. Was I the villain in their story? Was I the selfish one? But each time, I returned to that letter from the foundation, to the children who saw me as something other than a burden. One evening, as I sat reading it again, the phone rang. For a moment, my heart leapt. I thought maybe, just maybe, one of my grandchildren had called to apologize. But it wasn't them. It was Emily's old teacher, Mrs. Jacobs. Mr. Harlan, her voice was gentle but urgent. I don't mean to intrude, but I felt you should know. Your family, they've been talking, saying things, ugly things, but people who know you don't believe it. We remember how you donated desks to the school, how you paid for the playground repairs. Don't let their voices drown out the truth. Her words steadied me. Not everyone was fooled. Not everyone swallowed their poison. After we hung up, I sat quietly, staring at the embers in the fireplace. The war my family waged wasn't about houses or money anymore. It was about breaking me, making me doubt myself. But I wasn't broken. Not yet. And as I folded the foundation's letter and tucked it back into its envelope, I realized something important. They could take away my image in the eyes of others. They could smear my name in whispers and posts. But they could not take away my choice. My will was sealed. My legacy was secured. And no matter how hard they pushed, I would not bend. Still, deep inside, I sensed this was only the beginning. My children and grandchildren weren't finished. Their hunger was endless. And I knew the next move would come soon. Louder, uglier, more desperate than before. It didn't take long for their next move. One cold January morning, I opened the mailbox and found a thick envelope with my name printed in bold letters. The seal was from the county court. My hands trembled as I opened it, but not from weakness, from the anticipation of betrayal I had already expected. Inside was a petition. My son Mark and my daughter Linda were filing for guardianship. Their claim: Thomas Harlan is no longer of sound mind, incapable of handling his own affairs. I sat down on the porch steps, the papers rattling in the wind. The very children I had raised, who once begged me for bedtime stories and carried my name proudly, were now trying to declare me incompetent, to strip away my freedom, my dignity, my right to decide for myself. By afternoon, Mark called. His voice was rehearsed, professional, like a lawyer addressing a client rather than a son speaking to his father. Dad, this isn't personal. It's for your protection. You've been making questionable decisions. People are worried about you. People? I asked bitterly. Or just you and your sister? You've given everything away to strangers, he snapped. That's not rational. You need help, even if you can't see it. I hung up before he could say more. The silence afterward was deafening, broken only by the ticking of the hallway clock. For the first time, I felt the sting of fear. If the court ruled in their favor, they could undo everything. The will, the donations, my independence, it could all vanish. They would have me locked away in some facility, my house sold, my voice silenced. That night, I called Richard. They're trying to take me down, I said, my voice cracking despite myself. He was calm, steady as always. I suspected they would. Don't worry, Thomas. They'll have to prove you unfit, and that's not going to happen. You're sharper than half the men I argue against in court. His words steadied me, but doubt still gnawed at the edges of my mind. What if the judge believed them? What if my family convinced the world I was nothing but a senile old man clinging to bitterness? The days leading up to the hearing were some of the loneliest of my life. Neighbors whispered, church friends avoided me, and even the cashier at the grocery store looked at me with pity, as if I were already half gone. My family's lies had spread like wildfire. But just when the weight seemed unbearable, something unexpected happened. A knock came at my door one evening. When I opened it, two people stood outside, a woman in her 30s and a boy no older than 10. The woman smiled nervously, clutching a folder to her chest. "Mr. Harlan?" she asked. "I'm Sarah. This is my son, Caleb. We're from the Children's Foundation." I invited them in, unsure of what they wanted. We sat in the living room, the fire crackling as Sarah opened her folder. "I heard what your family is trying to do," she said softly. "I also heard the rumors. But we know the truth. Because of your donation, Caleb has a scholarship. He'll be able to go to school without worrying about money. And you didn't just give money, Mr. Harlan. You gave him a chance at a future." Caleb looked up at me, his eyes wide and sincere. "Thank you, sir," he said quietly. "I want to be a doctor one day. Because of you, I can." My throat tightened. For months, all I had heard were accusations, lies, venom from the very people I once loved. And here, in my own home, sat a boy whose gratitude was more genuine than anything I had heard from my own grandchildren in years. Sarah placed her hand gently on my arm. "If you need someone to testify for you, to speak about your clarity and your choices, we will. You are not alone in this." I swallowed hard, fighting back the tears. "Thank you," I whispered. The day of the hearing arrived. The courtroom was tense, filled with whispers. Mark and Linda sat with their lawyer, their faces set in grim determination. My grandchildren sat behind them, arms folded, eyes cold. The judge asked questions, my age, my finances, my decisions. Mark painted me as unstable. Linda added tales of erratic behavior. But when my turn came, I spoke clearly. I told the judge about my choices, about the donations, about the years of sacrifice that had been twisted into greed. And then, Sarah took the stand. Her voice was steady, her words simple but powerful. She told the judge how my gift had changed lives, how my decisions were not reckless but thoughtful, guided by empathy rather than obsession. Caleb even spoke, his small voice echoing in the silent courtroom. "Mr. Harlan is not crazy. He's kind. He helped me." For a moment, the courtroom was utterly still. Even Linda shifted uncomfortably, her eyes lowering. When the judge finally spoke, his words were firm. "The petition for guardianship is denied. Mr. Harlan is fully competent to manage his affairs." Relief washed over me like a tide. Richard clapped my shoulder, his smile rare but wide. Sarah and Caleb gave me a nod of reassurance from the benches. But when I turned to my family, I saw only rage. Mark's lips pressed into a thin line. Linda's eyes burned with fury. The grandchildren wouldn't even look at me. I had won again. But victory came at a price. The last fragile threads of family had been severed completely. And as I walked out of that courtroom, the cold winter air biting at my face, I realized something chilling. They weren't finished. If they couldn't steal my home through law, they would find another way. After the hearing, I thought maybe, just maybe, they would stop. That they would accept defeat and let me live in peace. But greed doesn't die quietly. It grows desperate, loud, shameless. The first sign came from my bank. I received a call one morning. A polite woman from the branch informing me that my son Mark had tried to access my accounts, claiming I had given him permission. He even provided forged documents. "Don't worry, Mr. Harlan," she assured me. "We didn't process anything. The signatures didn't match." Still, my chest tightened. They weren't just fighting me in court now. They were trying to break into my life piece by piece. Then came the phone calls. Not from strangers, but from neighbors, church members, even old friends. "Thomas," one woman said awkwardly, "your daughter Linda told us you've been unstable. She said you've been giving money away recklessly and locking yourself inside. Is everything all right?" Unstable. Reckless. The lies spread like fire through dry grass. They wanted me to look like a madman in the eyes of the community. One Sunday, as I tried to attend service, I overheard whispers behind me. "Poor man. Doesn't even realize his children are trying to save him." Another voice. "It's a shame, but sometimes the old lose their grip on reality." I left before the sermon began, walking home through the biting wind, each step heavier than the last. They weren't just trying to steal my estate anymore. They were trying to erase my name, my honor, my very self. A week later, things grew darker. I returned from the grocery store to find my mailbox stuffed with anonymous letters. No return address, but the handwriting was familiar. Inside, the words cut deep. You'll die alone. Everyone thinks you've lost your mind. You ruined your family. I knew where they came from. Linda had always had a flair for drama. That night, as I sat by the fire with the letters spread out before me, I felt a wave of exhaustion crash over me. Was this what the rest of my days would look like? Fighting shadows, battling whispers, being torn apart by the very people I once loved? But then, the phone rang. It was Sarah. "Mr. Harlan," she said gently, "I heard about the rumors. Please know, none of us at the foundation believe them. In fact, people are talking about you in a very different way. Parents, teachers, they see you as a man who stood up for what was right. A man who gave when it mattered most." Her words steadied me like a hand on my shoulder. And she wasn't the only one. The following week, the local newspaper published an article, "Veterans' Gift Secures Future for Hundreds of Children." My name was in the headline, my photograph beside it. For once, the world saw not the bitter old man my family painted me as, but the truth, a man who had chosen generosity over greed. Neighbors began to change. Some came by with warm meals, others with simple words, "You did the right thing, Thomas." Even the pastor, who had looked at me with doubt weeks before, stopped by my porch one evening. "I misjudged you," he admitted, his eyes downcast. "Your children came to me with stories, and I believed them. But I see now, you are not the broken one. They are." His words lifted a weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying. But my family didn't stop. One night, as I returned from the library dedication ceremony, I found Linda waiting on my porch. Her fur coat wrapped tightly around her, her eyes sharp. "Dad," she began, her voice icy, "you've embarrassed us enough. You think people admire you, but all you've done is destroy your own bloodline. How can you live with that?" I looked at her calmly. "I live with it the same way you live with your greed. Except mine doesn't rot me from the inside." Her lips trembled with fury. "You'll regret this. One day, you'll wish you had us by your side." I stepped closer, my voice low but steady. "I already wished that, Linda. For years. But wishing doesn't change the truth. You were never by my side. Not when it mattered." For a moment, she looked at me. Really looked, as if trying to find the father she once loved. But then, like always, the mask returned. She turned sharply, heels clicking against the porch as she stormed away. When the door closed behind her, I sank into my chair, the firelight flickering across the walls. My chest ached, not from defeat, but from the final threads of love snapping once and for all. Yes, they could still whisper. Yes, they could still fight. But the more they raged, the clearer the truth became to others. And for the first time, I realized something powerful. I didn't need them anymore. I didn't need their approval, their fake smiles, their poisoned words. Because I had something they could never steal, respect. Not from them, but from the people who mattered. From the children whose lives would be changed. From the community that was slowly waking up to the truth. Still, I knew in my bones this battle wasn't over. My children and grandchildren were desperate. And desperation makes people dangerous. The war wasn't finished. It was only shifting. It was February when the war took its ugliest turn. The snow outside had turned to dirty slush, and the gray skies seemed to press down on the house like a weight. I'd begun to feel some peace again, visiting the library, helping Sarah with the foundation, even volunteering at the local shelter. People were starting to see me not as the bitter old man, but as someone who still had something to give. But my family wasn't done. One evening, as I returned from the shelter, I noticed the front door of my house was slightly ajar. My stomach dropped. I knew I had locked it. Carefully, I pushed it open. The living room lights were off, but I could see drawers pulled open, papers scattered across the floor. Someone had been here. I called Richard immediately. He arrived within the hour, his expression grim as he surveyed the mess. "They're looking for something," he said. "Probably your financial records, proof they can twist against you." I felt a cold chill creep up my spine. My home, my safe place, violated by the very blood meant to protect me. The police came, took a report, and left with little hope of finding the culprit. But I didn't need proof. In my heart, I knew who had done this. A few nights later, the harassment grew bolder. I woke at 2 a.m. to pounding on my windows, voices shouting in the darkness. I couldn't make out the words, but I recognized the tone, mocking, cruel, familiar. By the time I gathered the courage to step outside, the street was empty. Only the echo of their laughter remained, carried by the cold wind. The next morning, I found spray paint across my garage door. Crazy old man. I stood there staring at it, my breath hanging in the frosty air. Neighbors passed by, some shaking their heads, others avoiding my gaze altogether. The shame burned, but beneath it was something stronger. Rage. That afternoon, Richard came by again. "They're escalating," he said, his voice low. "They couldn't win in court, so now they want to break you down, force you into a corner where you'll make mistakes." He was right, and for a moment, I wondered if I should just give in. Maybe let them have what they wanted, if only to stop the torment. But then, as if fate itself was reminding me why I had chosen this path, Sarah appeared at my door with Caleb and 2 other children from the foundation. They brought me a framed picture, hand-drawn, bright with colors. In it, a tall man with white hair stood smiling as children surrounded him. Above it, in crooked letters, were the words, "Thank you, Mr. Harlan, for being our hero." I stared at the picture, my throat tight. "Hero," I whispered, a word my own family had never once used for me. That night, I hung the picture above the fireplace, right where my grandchildren's photos used to sit. But my family wasn't finished with their schemes. 2 days later, Linda showed up unannounced, this time not with fake smiles, but with raw venom. "Dad," she hissed, shoving a stack of papers into my hands. "People are talking. You've embarrassed us, humiliated us. If you don't reverse this we'll make sure you're declared dangerous. We'll say you're unstable, that you've threatened us." I looked her dead in the eyes. "Go ahead." She blinked, caught off guard. "Go ahead," I repeated. "Say what you want. Spread your lies. But every day, more people see you for what you are. And every day, more people stand beside me. You've already lost, Linda. You just don't realize it yet." Her face twisted in fury, and she stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. The threats didn't stop there. Someone made an anonymous call to the police, reporting that I had been brandishing a weapon on my porch. The officers came, searched, and of course found nothing. But the humiliation of neighbors watching from behind their curtains cut deeper than any blade. Yet strangely, instead of breaking me, these attacks began to shift the tide. People who had doubted me before now saw the truth. They saw the cruelty of my children, the lies unraveling. A few even came by to apologize, bringing pies, warm meals, or simply words of kindness. One neighbor, Mr. Daniels, stopped me on the street. "Thomas," he said quietly, "I believe their stories. I thought you'd lost your mind. But now I see it's them. They've poisoned everything. And you, well, you're stronger than most men I know." His words planted something inside me I hadn't felt in years. Pride. That night, I sat by the fire, staring at the children's picture above the mantel. My family had tried to strip me of everything. My house, my dignity, my sanity. But in doing so, they had revealed themselves to the world. And the world was beginning to choose sides. I wasn't alone anymore. And as the flames danced in the fireplace, I whispered to myself, they wanted to destroy me. Instead, they gave me something more powerful, a legacy of truth. Still, deep in my bones, I knew the storm wasn't over. They would try again. Desperation always finds another door. But now, I wasn't afraid. Because even if blood had betrayed me, strangers had become my family. And in their eyes, I had already won. It was only a matter of time before they went public. One morning, I opened the local paper and nearly dropped my coffee. On the front page was an article. "Elderly man cuts out his own family in shocking betrayal." The photo they used was of me, taken outside the courthouse, my face tired, my posture stiff. Mark and Linda had given interviews, painting themselves as victims of a cruel, paranoid old man who had been manipulated by outsiders. They called me unstable. They called me selfish. They even claimed I was being controlled by the foundation, that I had been brainwashed into giving away my fortune. Neighbors saw it. Church members saw it. The whispers began again, louder than before. For a moment, shame pressed down on me so hard I couldn't breathe. They had twisted the story until I looked like the villain. But then, something I didn't expect. The next edition of the paper carried a response. Letters to the editor, dozens of them. Parents of children from the foundation. Teachers. Volunteers. Even Sarah herself. One wrote, "Mr. Harlan is not a bitter man. He is the reason my son will go to college. He chose kindness over greed." Another, "I've known Thomas for 40 years. He's generous, clear-headed, and strong. His family should be ashamed. The tide began to turn again. People I barely knew stopped me on the street, shaking my hand, telling me I'd done something noble. For every lie my children spread, the truth found a louder echo. But that night, as I sat alone by the fire, I knew something with icy certainty. My family wasn't finished. They had lost in court, lost in the eyes of some neighbors, but humiliation only made them angrier. And angry people are dangerous. The knock came late at night. 2 officers stood on my porch, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. "Mr. Harlan?" one asked. "We received a report. May we come in?" Confused, I let them inside. They moved straight to my study, as if they already knew where to look. And there, on my desk, lay a small plastic bag filled with pills. Not mine. I had never seen them before. "Sir," the officer said carefully, "your daughter called. She claimed you've been abusing medication. Said you've been hiding it." My stomach turned cold. They'd done it. They had planted it. "I don't take anything stronger than aspirin," I said firmly. "This isn't mine." The officers exchanged looks, then nodded. "We'll file the report, but, to be honest, sir, it doesn't add up. You seem sharp, calm. If someone's trying to set you up, it'll come out." After they left, I sat in the dark, staring at the bag on the desk. My own blood had tried to brand me a drug addict, just to win back control. The next morning, Richard stormed into my house, fury in his eyes. "They've crossed a line, Thomas. A big one. Planting evidence? Filing false reports? That's a crime. And if they keep this up, we'll make sure the law finally turns on them." I nodded slowly, the weight of exhaustion pulling at me. But deep inside, there was also something else, steel. They thought they could destroy me with lies. But the truth, no matter how buried, always claws its way to the surface. And soon, it would bury them instead. The storm broke at the town hall meeting. I went there simply to listen, just an old man in the back row, wrapped in my winter coat. But when the floor opened for public comments, Linda stood up. Her voice rang through the room, sweet on the surface but dripping with poison underneath. "My father," she announced, "has been manipulated. He's been giving away his fortune recklessly. We're worried for his safety and for the community he's leaving behind." Heads turned toward me. Mark joined in, waving a stack of papers. "We have proof he's unstable. He can't be trusted to manage his own affairs. He's destroying his family and embarrassing this town." Murmurs rippled across the hall. My chest tightened, shame pressing like a weight on my ribs. They had planned this carefully, a public ambush, where whispers could spread faster than truth. But then, something I didn't expect. Sarah rose from her seat. Her voice trembled at first, but grew stronger with each word. "Mr. Harlan isn't unstable. He's generous. Because of him, children in this town will eat, will read, will dream bigger than they ever could before. He gave not out of madness, but out of love." Then others stood, parents, teachers, even neighbors who once doubted me. One man said, "I've known Thomas for 40 years. He's sharper than half the people in this room. The only unstable thing I see is the greed of his children." The room erupted, not in applause, but in a shift I could feel in my bones. People were no longer looking at me with pity. They were looking at my family with disgust. Linda's face paled. Mark's jaw tightened. They had wanted to bury me in shame, but instead they buried themselves. As I sat silently, hands folded in my lap, I realized something important. For the first time, I wasn't fighting this war alone. The truth had found its voice, and my family's lies were beginning to crumble under the weight of it. Their desperation was like a drowning man clawing for air, wild, reckless, and doomed. A week after the town hall, a TV crew showed up outside my house. Cameras pointed at my porch, microphones shoved in my face. The reporter's voice was sharp. "Mr. Harlan, your children claim you've been exploited by outsiders, that you're giving away your life's work while they're left abandoned. Do you regret your choices?" Behind the cameras, I saw Linda and Mark, pretending to look heartbroken, standing arm in arm like victims in a tragedy they had written themselves. For a moment, I froze. The old me, the man who once hated confrontation, would have retreated inside, shut the door, let their narrative win. But not now. I straightened my back and faced the cameras. "My children are not abandoned," I said clearly. "They abandoned me years ago. I gave them time, love, support, and they answered with greed. My money will go where it can do good, not where it will rot. The crowd that had gathered on the sidewalk murmured. The cameras stayed fixed on me, waiting for me to falter. But before I could say more, Sarah appeared with Caleb and a few others from the foundation. She stepped in front of the cameras, her voice steady. "Mr. Harlan saved lives," she declared. "He gave children hope. That's not exploitation, that's legacy." The cameras swung to her, capturing every word. My children's faces tightened, their performance unraveling in real time. 2 days later, their final card arrived, another court summons. This time they accused the foundation of coercion and claimed I had been pressured to sign my estate away. Richard laughed when he saw the paperwork. "They're digging their own grave," he said. "This claim won't hold. We'll expose every lie they've told." And that's exactly what happened. In court, their words collapsed under cross-examination. Every witness, every letter of thanks from the foundation, every neighbor who testified in my favor, it all piled against them. When the judge dismissed the case, Linda broke down in tears. Mark stormed out, his face red with rage. My grandchildren wouldn't even look at me. I walked out of that courtroom with Richard at my side, the winter sun cold but bright on my face. I had survived their storm. But the question lingered in my chest. What happens when the storm finally breaks apart completely? When spring finally came, the snow melted from my roof, dripping steady into the gutters. The air smelled of rain and earth, and for the first time in years, I felt lighter. The war was over, not because my family had surrendered, but because they had nothing left to fight with. The courts had dismissed them, the town had seen through them, the cameras had stopped chasing shadows. Their lies collapsed under their own weight. Mark stopped calling. Linda no longer showed up in her fur coat with crocodile tears. My grandchildren unfollowed me online, as if erasing me from their feeds could erase the truth. In the end, they walked away with nothing. Not my house, not my savings, not my dignity. And strangely, I didn't feel hatred. Only sorrow. Sorrow for the children I once carried on my shoulders, for the family dinners that once filled this house with laughter. But sorrow is not the same as weakness. One afternoon, I stood in the new reading room at the library. On the wall, a bronze plaque gleamed, in memory of Margaret Harlan, a gift of her husband, Thomas. Children ran between the shelves, their laughter ringing like bells, their arms filled with books they never would have had without that plaque, without that gift. Sarah stood beside me, smiling. "You did this," she whispered. "This is your legacy." I nodded, my throat tight. "No," I said softly. "They did this. Every child here. I only gave them what my own family never understood, love without condition." That night, I returned to my quiet house. I sat by the fire, staring at the picture the foundation children had drawn for me. Above the mantel, it glowed brighter than any family portrait I had ever hung. I poured myself a small glass of whiskey, raised it toward the flames, and whispered. They thought they would inherit my fortune. Instead, they inherited their own shame. And I leave behind something greater than money. The fire crackled, warm and steady, like a heartbeat. For the first time in a long, long while, I felt free.